I don't know quite what it is that I feel. Fear, perhaps, actually. A fear of what is left when everything of value and importance is removed. The ministerial code makes it pretty clear that if you are found to have misled the House, and who but the most sycophantic forelock tugger today could argue that he hasn't already been found to have misled the House, then that would be a resignation issue. But that is in normal times. That is a regime or a government where if the independent advisor on ministerial standards submits a report pointing out and concluding that the Home Secretary is a bully, then the Home Secretary is toast. We do not live in that country anymore. If the House of Commons passes a motion calling for the release of security advice on whether or not the son of a former KGB agent should be elevated to the House of Lords, then that advice would be published. But we don't live in that country anymore. If a Prime Minister stands up in front of the entire country and claims he never attended any parties and then is forced to admit that actually he did, then there would be a resignation immediately. But we don't live in that country anymore. If a senior ally of a Prime Minister is found to have acted corruptly while lobbying for companies that pay him for his services and subsequently fibbing about it, he would get a month-long suspension and everybody else in his party would hang their head in shame. But we don't live in that country anymore because, of course, they tried to save Owen Paterson with the collusion of client journalists and pom-pom waving cheerleaders in the highest offices of Fleet Street. If a senior advisor to the Prime Minister were to be found to have ridden roughshod, driven a coach and horses through the rules that the rest of the country was doing its best to follow by driving to a beauty spot called Barnard Castle on the occasion of his wife's birthday, he would have had to resign. But we don't live in that country anymore. If he had subsequently looked you in the eye and claimed that he actually did it to test his eyesight with his wife in the passenger seat and his baby son in the back, he would have had to resign. But we don't live in that country anymore. If the Foreign Secretary were found by a report conducted by his own colleagues in the House of Commons to have betrayed the people of Afghanistan and to have remained on holiday during a retreat that went wrong in just about every imaginable way, he would have had to resign. But we don't live in that country anymore. And I'm doing this off the top of my head. I don't have a list in front of me of the things that once would have happened in the country that we used to live in, because we don't live in that country anymore. I do have a list in front of me. I have a list of clips of Boris Johnson talking about parties. I can remind you how it unfolded. I can remind you how it unravelled. There were no parties. There were parties, but I didn't go to them. There were parties, and I did go to them, but I didn't know they were parties. There were parties, and I did go to them, but I didn't know they were parties, even as I stood with my glass of champagne in the air, addressing the other party-goers, at least one of whom has been fined for attending that gathering, at which the Prime Minister gave a speech. Straight out the door. Sayonara. Adios, goodbye. But we don't live in that country anymore. How do you want to do it today? I think it's contagious, not caring. I think some people who would once have cared have caught the disease from the Prime Minister. Boris Johnson doesn't care about anything. He never has, and he never will. One of the saddest sights is seeing people who presumably once knew better pretend to believe or fall for the idea that this might be the final transgression, that he might finally start pulling his socks up. You saw it, I think, at its boldest after he came home from hospital, having contracted coronavirus, after, of course, boasting about shaking hands with people who had it. And everyone said, oh, I think he's changed now. I think he's going to be more serious. One of the early examples of that, of course, was the efforts to take a grip upon the obesity crisis that is sweeping the country as we speak. But, of course, last week he reverse-ferreted on the legislation that was designed to help address the obesity crisis. This idea that he's going to finish, this idea that he's going to improve, that he's going to finally rise to the challenge. It's incredible. isn't it? It's incredible.